The dust of Deadwood Creek settled like shame over the makeshift auction platform, where human dignity went to die under the scorching Arizona sun. Sarah Mae Thornton stood barefoot on the splintered wooden stage, her calloused hands instinctively protecting the rounded curve of her belly where new life grew despite the cruelty surrounding her. Before we begin, we'd like to ask you to tell us your name and the city you're watching from. We love getting to know our audience. Also, please don't forget to give this video a like, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel. That way we can keep bringing you more stories like this one. Come now, gentlemen. Brother Tommy called out to the crowd of leering faces, his voice slick with false enthusiasm. Look at this fine specimen of womanhood. Strong as an ox, good for breeding, and she's already proven her fertility. He gestured crudely toward her pregnancy, and Sarah Mae flinched as if struck. The crowd of ranchers, drifters, and gamblers pressed closer, their breath reeking of whiskey and tobacco. Some shouted crude comments about her condition, others speculated about the work she could do. Sarah Mae kept her eyes fixed on the horizon, where purple mountains promised escape she'd never find. She can cook, clean, birth babies, and work harder than any man here, Tommy continued, his gambling debts making him desperate. Starting bid is $50. The bearded man in a torn vest raised his hand. 30. She looks half-starved. 40, called another. But only if she can still work the fields. Sarah Mae closed her eyes, feeling the baby stir restlessly in her womb. She whispered a silent prayer that this child would know kindness, even if she never would again. The bidding continued around her, like vultures fighting over carrion. From the back of the crowd, a tall figure in a weathered black hat observed the scene with quiet intensity. Jake Quiet Morrison had come to town for supplies, not to witness human misery. But something about the woman's dignified bearing, despite her circumstances, caught his attention. Her brother's cruelty reminded him of his own painful past. "Dollars!" someone shouted. Came another bidder. Jake watched the woman's shoulders tremble, not from fear, but from exhaustion. Her auburn hair caught the sunlight despite its tangled state, and something in her posture spoke of inner strength that hadn't been broken, only bent. When she lifted her chin defiantly at another crude comment, Jake made his decision. $100. Gold. His deep voice cut through the noise like a blade. The crowd turned to stare at the stranger. Jake stepped forward, his spurs jingling softly against the wooden walkway. He was tall and lean, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of storm clouds. A Colt .45 hung low on his hip, and his presence commanded respect. Tommy's eyes lit, up with greed. Now that's more like it. 100 going once? Wait, the bearded man protested. I ain't done bidding. Jake's hand moved slightly toward his weapon. You are now. The man swallowed hard and stepped back. The message was clear without words being spoken. 100 going twice, sold to the quiet stranger. Tommy announced, practically salivating over the gold. Jake climbed onto the platform and approached Sarah Mae slowly, as if she were a wounded animal that might bolt. When he spoke, his voice was surprisingly gentle. "Ma'am, my name is Jake Morrison. I won't harm you or your child. You have my word." Sarah Mae looked into his eyes and saw something she hadn't expected: genuine kindness. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to hope. Jake counted out the gold coins into Tommy's eager palm, then removed his long coat and wrapped it around Sarah Mae's shoulders. "Let's get you home," he said simply. As they walked toward his horse and wagon, Sarah Mae whispered, "Why?" Jake helped her climb onto the wagon seat with careful hands. "Everyone deserves dignity, ma'am, especially someone bringing new life into this world." The wagon wheels began to turn, carrying Sarah Mae away from her nightmare toward an uncertain but somehow promising future. The Morrison Ranch sat in a valley between rolling hills, where wildflowers painted the meadows in brilliant colors, and a crystal-clear stream wound through the property like a silver ribbon. Sarah Mae had expected a crude cabin, but Jake's home was a well-built two-story house with a wide porch and flower boxes beneath the windows. "It's beautiful," she breathed, the first genuine word she'd spoken during their 3-hour journey. Jake helped her down from the wagon, his touch respectful and brief. Built it myself over the years. Never had much use for the extra rooms until now. Inside the house was clean and comfortable, furnished with handmade wooden furniture and colorful quilts. Stone fireplace dominated one wall and books lined shelves throughout the main room. Sarah May ran her fingers along the spines, surprised to find poetry alongside practical volumes on ranching. "You read?" she asked. Jake nodded, suddenly self-conscious. "Long winter nights out here. Books are good company." He showed her to a bedroom upstairs, complete with a 4-poster bed and a rocking chair by the window. "This will be yours. There's a wash basin and clean clothes in the dresser. Take all the time you need to settle in." Sarah May stood in the doorway, overwhelmed. "I don't understand. What do you expect from me?" Jake turned to face her, his hat in his hands. "Nothing beyond what you're willing to give. You're not my property, ma'am. You're a guest in my home until you decide what you want to do with your future. But I paid to keep you safe," he interrupted gently. "That's all. Over." The following days, Sarah May began to heal in ways she hadn't thought possible. Jake was true to his word, asking nothing of her except to rest and regain her strength. He cooked simple but nourishing meals, tended to his cattle and horses, and in the evenings, he would read aloud by the fireplace, while she mended clothes or simply listened. Her pregnancy progressed peacefully in the calm environment. The baby seemed to sense the change, too, moving more gently within her. Jake had awkwardly provided her with fabric to sew proper maternity clothes, blushing furiously when he explained his purchase to the general store clerk in the nearest town. "You didn't have to," she'd started to protest. "Every woman deserves clothes that fit properly," he'd replied, then quickly excused himself to tend to the horses. One evening, as autumn painted the valley in gold and crimson, Sarah May found Jake on the porch, watching the sunset. She settled into the chair beside him, her hand resting on her now prominently rounded belly. "The baby's active tonight," she said softly. Jake glanced at her with concern. "Are you in pain?" "No, just restless. I think he or she likes the cool evening air." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the ranch, cattle lowing in the distance, the whisper of wind through grass, the gentle creak of the porch swing. "Da-da," Sarah May said finally. "Why are you really doing this?" The truth. Jake was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with old pain. "Had a sister once, younger than me. When our parents died, I was supposed to protect her. Instead, I left her with relatives who sold her to pay their debts. By the time I came back to find her, it was too late. She died trying to escape." Sarah May's heart ached for the pain in his voice. "I'm sorry. When I saw you on that platform looking so brave despite everything, I couldn't let history repeat itself. Not when I had the power to stop it." Sarah May reached out tentatively and placed her hand over his. "You saved me, Jake. You and this baby. The first time since she'd known him." Jake smiled, really smiled, and Sarah May felt something warm and wonderful bloom in her chest. The first snow fell on Morrison Ranch like a benediction, transforming the valley into a crystalline wonderland. Sarah May watched from the kitchen window as Jake chopped wood for the fireplace, his breath forming small clouds in the crisp air. At 8 months pregnant, she moved more slowly now, but her spirits had never been higher. The transformation had been gradual but profound. Where once she'd been hollow-eyed and afraid, she now hummed while cooking breakfast and smiled when she felt the baby's strong kicks. Jake had done more than rescue her. He'd shown her how to live again. "Storms coming," Jake announced as he stamped snow off his boots. "Could be a big one. We'll need to stay close to the house for a few days." Sarah May ladled eggs onto his plate, noting how natural this domestic routine had become. "Good thing you taught me to preserve vegetables. We'll eat well even if we're snowed in." Jake accepted the plate with a nod of thanks, then hesitated. "Sarah May, if the baby comes during the storm, I'm not due for another month." She interrupted, though privately she'd been feeling strange twinges lately. "Sometimes babies come early. I've delivered foals and calves, but I've never She placed a reassuring hand on his arm. You've done more than enough already. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. The word together hung in the air between them, carrying more weight than either wanted to acknowledge. Their relationship had evolved from rescuer and rescued to something deeper, more complex. Jake still slept in the barn most nights, insisting the house was hers. But the emotional distance between them had shrunk considerably. During the long winter evenings, they'd begun sharing stories of their pasts. Sarah May told him about her childhood before her parents died, how she'd loved to read and dream of traveling. Jake spoke of his time as a cavalry scout, his plans to expand the ranch, his love for this isolated valley where a man could live free from judgment. "Do you ever get lonely out here?" she asked one evening as they played checkers by the fire. Jake considered the question seriously. "Used to? Not so much anymore." "Because of the company?" "It's because of you," he admitted quietly, then immediately looked embarrassed by his candor. Sarah May felt her cheeks warm. "Jake, I need you to know. What happened to me before, the baby's father, he wasn't someone I chose. He was one of Tommy's gambling friends, and when I tried to refuse..." Jake's jaw tightened, but his voice remained gentle. "You don't need to explain anything to me. The past is the past. What matters is who you choose to be now. And if I chose to stay here, to make this ranch my home," Jake's eyes met hers across the checkerboard, "then I'd consider myself the luckiest man in Arizona territory." 3 days later, the storm arrived with a vengeance. Wind howled around the house while snow piled against the windows in drifts that reached the sills. Jake had moved his bedroll to the main room just in case, though they both knew the baby wasn't due yet. That night, Sarah May woke to pain unlike anything she'd experienced. She gripped the bedpost, breathing through the contraction, and realized with crystal clarity that their child, that's how she'd come to think of the baby, wasn't going to wait for spring. "Jake," she called out, her voice steady despite the fear creeping up her spine. He appeared in the doorway instantly, alert and ready. One look at her face told him everything he needed to know. "It's time," she whispered. Jake's face went pale, but his voice remained calm. "All right. Let's bring this baby safely into the world." As another contraction gripped her, Sarah May held tight to Jake's strong hand and prepared to face the greatest challenge and miracle of her life. Dawn broke clear and bright over Morrison Ranch, painting the snow-covered valley in shades of pink and gold. Inside the warm house, Sarah May cradled her newborn daughter against her chest, marveling at the tiny, perfect fingers and the shock of dark hair that crowned her head. "She's beautiful," Jake whispered, his voice filled with wonder as he gazed down at the baby. Throughout the long night, he'd been her anchor, holding her hand through contractions, following her instructions when the birthing became urgent, and never once showing the fear she knew he must have felt. "Thank you, Sarah," May said, her eyes bright with tears of joy and exhaustion. "I couldn't have done this without you." Jake gently smoothed a strand of hair from her face. "You were the bravest woman I've ever seen. She's lucky to have you as her mother." The baby stirred and opened her eyes, storm-gray eyes that seemed to look directly at Jake. Something profound shifted in his expression, a tenderness Sarah May had never seen before. "What will you name her?" he asked softly. Sarah May had thought about this moment for months. "Hope. Her name is Hope Morrison." Jake's breath caught. "Morrison, if you'll have us, both of us, as your family." For a moment, Jake couldn't speak. Then he leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to Sarah May's forehead. "I've wanted to ask you to marry me for months, but I didn't know if you could ever see me as more than the man who bought you. You didn't buy me, Jake. You freed me. You showed me what love really looks like. Patient, kind, protective without being possessive. You gave me back my dignity and helped me remember who I really am." Jake carefully sat on the edge of the bed, his calloused rancher's hands surprisingly gentle as he touched the baby's cheek. "I love you, Sarah May. I love both of you. Want to spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice? Then ask me properly," she said with a tired but radiant smile. Jake took her hand in his. "Sarah May Thornton, will you marry me?" Will you let me be Hope's father and your husband? Will you help me turn this ranch into a real home?" "Yes," she whispered, her heart so full she thought it might burst. Yes to everything. Months later, when spring had returned to the valley and Hope had grown strong and healthy, they were married by the circuit preacher in the small church in Deadwood Creek. Sarah May wore a dress of cornflower blue that Jake had ordered specially from Denver, and Hope slept peacefully in her arms. Throughout the ceremony, some of the townspeople whispered about the unusual circumstances of their courtship, but most saw only what was obvious: a man and woman deeply in love, committed to building a life together based on respect, kindness, and genuine affection. As they stood on the church steps after the ceremony, Hope began to fuss. Jake immediately reached for her, and she settled instantly in his arms, her tiny hand grasping his finger. "She knows who her papa is," Sarah May observed with a smile. "I'll spend every day earning that title," Jake promised. They returned to the ranch as a family, where Jake had surprised Sarah May by hanging a hand-carved sign over the door. The Morrison family ranch, founded on love. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Hope sleeping peacefully in her cradle between them, Sarah May reflected on the journey that had brought them here. A year ago, she'd stood on an auction block, convinced her life was over. Now she was surrounded by love, holding her healthy daughter, married to a man who cherished her for exactly who she was. "What are you thinking about?" Jake asked, noting her contemplative expression. "Miracles," she replied. "Sometimes they come disguised as ordinary cowboys with extraordinary hearts." Jake reached for her hand, and they sat together in comfortable silence, watching their horses graze in the meadow and listening to the gentle sounds of their ranch. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: cattle to tend, crops to plant, baby to raise, but tonight was perfect. In the distance, a meadowlark sang its evening song, and baby Hope stirred in her sleep, perhaps dreaming of all the love and adventures that awaited her in this valley where broken hearts came to heal and quiet cowboys worked everyday miracles.